So hey everybody, I am here today to talk about one of my favorite reality shows. I'm not even ashamed to admit this, but I'm here and I will let Erin introduce herself first.
Hi, I'm Erin Kearns. I'm a professor at the University of Alabama in Criminology and Criminal Justice. My normal research focuses on terrorism and counterterrorism, relationships between communities and law enforcement, and a little bit of sort of media representations and misrepresentations of crime. And I'm going to pretend that that is an academic interest that ties into 90 Day Fiance as well.
And I'm Dr. Ghazi Tehrani, same department, same university. I study cybercrime and white-collar crime, so this is a little bit further out of my normal studies. But I'm going to also admit that this is a guilty pleasure, and I'd like to talk about it.
So surprisingly, right, academics and criminologists don't just sit around writing papers and thinking about crime. Sometimes we stop and do other things. But then we can't ever really take our hat off of a criminologist and looking at crime and how it's portrayed. So we're going to pretend like this is a completely academic endeavor.
Yeah.
Fair.
So just for each of you, what do you think we can learn from 90 Day Fiance?
I think one of the things that I was struck by in the uncomfortable number of hours that I've spent watching this show and thinking about it is, sort of just the casual ways that crime and responses to crime are portrayed in the show. And like sometimes things are taken extremely seriously when they're fairly minor crimes. Other more major crimes that like sometimes happen on camera are sort of brushed off as not being that big of a deal. I think that's, can potentially really sort of influence how members of the public perceive seriousness versus non-seriousness of crime.
Definitely. We have, stats on things like domestic violence. And so hearing about it or seeing it on TV, I think makes it a reality for a lot of people. So, we know the behind the scenes, how much this is going on. If you're in a happy marriage, maybe you think that it's not as common as it could be. And we've seen a number of couples that have divorced because of issues of violence and things like that. And so when the show covers it, and again, they do cover it differently sometimes, but they are showing kind of a reality for people to witness.
Yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge too that some of this might be staged or scripted in some sense. I also watched The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. So, I think that there's some element of planning to this about what's interesting, but I still think regardless, we can learn some things. So I guess we can start with a discussion, maybe just even about coming to the United States, because for those people who don't know about 90 Day Fiance, the idea is that people meet usually online, and they try to bring their partner to the United States, and immigration laws being what they are, generally have 90 days to marry this person, which is kind of bananas in general, but that's probably a whole different discussion. So if we want to talk about maybe what was difficult about some of the people from other countries coming to the United States.
Sure. So certainly there's challenges that some of the couples have because of, U.S. immigration law being what it is. Whatever the country is that their partner is in is either a country that's more difficult to bring a person to the U.S., a country where people from that country are banned from coming to the U.S. currently, like one of the women who married a man who's Syrian. One of the things, though, that relates specifically to crime is about, the challenges that a couple of the couples have had where their partner, who's, the American's partner who's in another country, has a criminal record in their home country that is preventing them from being able to potentially even come visit the United States, let alone move here. One of the couples is, John and Rachel, which are a couple that, in this universe where it's not always clear that they're really in love, this couple seems to be really, truly, madly in love with each other. He seems to be a really great guy, but he was arrested for getting into some fights when he was a juvenile, and that's preventing him in his 30s now from coming to the US from the UK.
Yeah, I think that when that issue is a lot more prevalent than we would understand, right? Like how juvenile records can affect people in their adult lives, right? Or even adult criminal records can prevent people from doing and accessing certain things. The same had happened with Tiffany and Ronald. He had a gambling addiction and had committed a number of crimes associated with that. So like property crime and theft and things. So she actually went there and lived for a while and then realized that she was not having a good time. uh, so then she came back to the United States to have their baby, but he essentially can't come to the United States because of his background. But then it also, people in America, their criminal backgrounds don't necessarily prevent them from going to other countries.
Correct.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I haven't seen the seasons that these individuals are in, but I can give kind of a current event example of this. There have been a number of Canadians that have now been barred entry to the U.S. because they've smoked marijuana and admitted it to an border guard, something that is legal, nationwide there. So they feel like admitting it is the right thing to do because what they're doing is not illegal where they're from, but it is illegal here. And so it is interesting, right? And not to diminish any of the crimes that may have occurred outside of the country, but it does seem like we are much more strict on letting people in than letting people out, or other countries letting Americans in.
Right. And I know that certain countries, I think the US included, like you need to prove that you can contribute something to the culture, the economy. You have to have a purpose for being here. So when we talk about Paul and Karini, because I feel like we can't discuss crime without talking about Paul and Karini and like just these layers of crime. Paul had an extensive criminal record.
And not minor things like arson a number of times.
I think terrorism was on there, like conspiracy.
It was mistranslated on his Brazilian visa application, but yeah, it was.
Mm-hmm. And they were like intimate partner cases too, right? So the idea of him going to Brazil for love is mildly alarming.
And that has played out over the many seasons and multiple series that he and Karini have now been a part of.
Yes.
I don't even know where to start with this. I mean, so, he has this criminal record and he's allowed into Brazil, and this, he's also in his late 30s and Karini is in her late teens, early 20s. I mean, so there's just sort of the age gap, which itself is not criminal, but just sort of thinking about some of the power dynamics potentially that also play out throughout the show. You see, there's a scene in Brazil where he gets upset by something minor and literally just runs away, which if you've watched the show is like, oh, Paul ran away again. And it shows that Karini is robbed by somebody as he's running away. And then they come to the US and all of this stuff continues. Have you seen this season, Adam?
Yeah, so that was, I don't know if amazing is the correct word, but definitely unbelievable and kind of ridiculous. So the arson charges pre their meeting are one thing, and I would be, pissed if I found out a significant other had kind of hid a major crime like this. But then the ones that have come out, kind of since, and if you follow the templates, they have hinted that there were some kind of sexual abuse type things where he was using the green card kind of like as collateral or as blackmail, basically saying, do this with me or I will, cut up your card or get rid of it and you'll have to go back home, which horrific. It just kind of makes you wonder, had she known about his past, and I mean, arson and sexual abuse are different crimes, but maybe she would have been more cautious in the beginning, for sure. And it's kind of sad that it has reached this point.
It is. It's almost hard to talk about them without kind of throwing gasoline on this, or like using it in like an exploitative way. But it's just a generally bad situation from top to bottom, that it went from like fun kind of trashy guilty pleasure TV to like a woman and her child might actually be in danger, and this is bad.
Right. And
Really?
I think and I think like part of what the show has portrayed is his failure to get a job, and he plays it off as he's trying and it's not working out. Karini kind of realizes that he's not really trying, but I think underlying all of this is the fact that he does have a criminal record, which makes getting a job quite difficult. So The way that the show portrays it might be how the relationship and how the individuals within it are perceiving it. But, you know, the institution, right? Like having a jail or a prison record does make it harder to get hired. And that is a reality for a lot of people with, you know, any kind of felony on their record.
Yeah. And for him too, when he was in Brazil, he seemed kind of stumped at like why he couldn't get a job anywhere, despite the fact that he didn't speak Portuguese.
Yeah.
There's a whole other layer of the Americans' sense of entitlement and lack of acknowledgement of other cultural norms. I think that's the nicest way I could say it.
Yes.
That overlays a lot of this series as well.
Right. So a really good example of that is Nicole and Azan in Morocco when she moved, or she went there. So if one of you wants to talk about that.
Erin?
Yeah, that's all. I mean, so, you know, that so Nicole's American, her fiance Azan is from Morocco. She's gone there multiple times. And despite him being very clear about what are the norms, what is allowable within Moroccan culture in terms of, you know, a couple who is not married and public displays of affection, sharing hotel rooms, etc., she just seems like absolutely unable to comprehend that there are different cultural norms and rules that she must abide by. And we saw this in one of the spin-offs with Aladdin, and I can't remember the woman's name now off the top of my head, but Laura, right, where she goes to Qatar and is like shocked that she can't walk around in a tank top. And it's like, did you not do a basic Google search of where you're going? So sort of seeing that, like, just that the differences in law across different places and how it's not always sort of understood. Right.
And I think it's interesting, like the cultural expectations that a lot of the individuals on the show have. So the Americans tend to, at least the males, envision like the rest of the women of the world to be more subservient and kind of, you know, like willing to do whatever I ask, right? And then when they go and they realize that that's not really the reality, it's kind of like this rude awakening. And then there are these people that just don't seem to get it. And so I think Nicole is kind of like the perfect example where, not that Azan is a great dude by any stretch, there are definite problems there. He reiterates over and over and over again in private and in public, like, you can't touch me. He says it's against the culture. I actually looked it up, and there are some laws on the books against, you know, public displays of affection. And so I don't know, you know, what the consequences of those things would be, but she's pushing basically for what is illegal conduct in the country that she's in. And in the show, at one point, they're kind of fighting and they both shove one another. And so there's this kind of, you know, you get to, like, not to say that like it's light, but, you know, domestic violence on TV that is kind of not reacted to, right? Like, they don't address the fact that you shouldn't be pushing each other, you shouldn't be shoving each other. But what gets them to that point is, again, this kind of habitual line stepping from Nicole.
Yeah. Even on the reunion shows, or like the, you know, when they bring everybody together, they always kind of devolve, or more recently have devolved into like Jerry Springer type situations where they're like standing up and they're nose to nose. So I think they're using this violence and this aggression as like I mean, I tune in for it, so I guess I'm guilty of it. Another example of that was Rebecca and Ziad. She went and he told her to cover up. He was a Muslim man, but he wanted her to cover up. And it's not so much he committed a crime against her. They technically maybe or maybe not broke laws, but it led to confrontations with other men at restaurants and in public. So this, like you said, the lack of awareness of other cultures or respect for cultures is yet another fun part of this show.
Yeah, I think, I mean, sort of similarly, a lot of this, you know, the show could do, I think, a better job of portraying this as like, I guess I worry sometimes when I watch, and again, a little overly analytical perhaps, that the show is sort of like like, ha, this isn't really domestic violence. This is for, you know, for entertainment value, and don't really address it as like, these Americans are breaking the law in another country. Like, that's on you know, us, the collective sort of in-group,
Yes.
is portrayed as a little bit more like, oh, haha, funny how antiquated these other laws are, these other cultures, and haha, this isn't really a big serious deal with domestic violence, which I worry about sort of the message that sends to, you know, the non-criminologist viewers of these shows.
Right. And like, I'm a mixed race Persian man, right? So I pass as white, but I have, Middle Eastern blood. And, there are regressive laws in a lot of these places, both subjectively from an American lens, and then objectively, I think, kind of, treating equals as equals. But the time and place to challenge these things perhaps isn't, while you're trying to get a spouse and are at risk in that foreign country, right? So it does come off a little bit, not preachy, but unawares from the American side. And I think that a lot of us are kind of comfortable in, right, like the bubble that we've grown up in, where we can wear whatever we want and we can say whatever we want. And to be in a place where you can't do those things feels wrong, but also you're not going to have your day in court, right, to like argue your case and then be like, oh, well, yeah, we'll let you go because you think this or feel differently, right? It is, they're putting themselves at some level of risk to do these things.
Yeah, I don't think American exceptionalism is a is a defense,
right,
in a lot of other countries.
For sure.
Yeah.
So when we talk about domestic violence, we touched on Paul and Karini. I don't know if we can have this conversation without talking about Colton Larissa.
Oh, we cannot.
So Larissa, oh, Adam's ready to go.
Yeah.
So Larissa came from Brazil, and she moved to Las Vegas with Colton to live with him and his mother in their townhome and their cats. And so they had kind of a tumultuous history. Does anybody want to give more of the backstory for that?
Yeah, I can jump on this one. So I kind of went on a journey with my impressions of the couple. So when they're originally presented, I feel like the show is edited in a way that you kind of feel like Colt is a homebody, harmless, lives with his mom, has some cats, kind of good old boy. And Larissa is kind of like the firebrand foreign problem starter. And there's a couple of scenes. So, for example, they're out getting dinner somewhere, and he compliments the server on her glasses. He basically says, like, I like your glasses. She says, I like yours too. And they show Larissa kind of saying, like, you're flirting with her, you're taking this over the line, whatever. And then kind of as the show goes on, not that Larissa becomes like a magically better person, but we start finding out more of the things that Colt has kind of been doing behind the scenes. And he definitely gives me a little bit of like, he's playing emotion. He actually isn't having these emotions. And so the show ends with, and their divorce is precipitated by 3 events of domestic violence. So the police are called by Colt and his mother 3 times on Larissa. There's bloody pictures of his face on the internet. So violence was done. But not that, it should have gotten to that point, but there's definitely Colt is kind of, he's messing with her a little bit, right? And that should never turn to violence. That should never turn to abuse, period. But the way that the show kind of portrays the relationship, it's not as genuine as I think that relationship actually was.
Yeah, Erin, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, so I've watched some of the like Where Are They Now seasons, because like I really fell deep into the show over the summer. And some of this you see then Colt with another Brazilian woman, where you realize that he's also just a pathological liar who is manipulating situations to make himself seem like he's innocent. And again, like Adam's read, where it's just like, he just gives me a vibe. Like, I don't believe a word that comes out of your mouth, and I wouldn't let you watch like my hamster for the weekend because you just don't seem trustworthy. And she's equally, problematic, but you have these like, sort of this casualness of these domestic violence charges where it's not really made to be a serious enough deal. And in one of the, Where Are They Now or whatever series, it follows Larissa through her journey throughout the court system and, the risks with the immigration system. I think she was perhaps detained by ICE at some point in the last few months, because I've checked that with also.
Important things that we need to learn about.
Right. Now my phone just suggests these articles to me, which does not indicate a problem. But I mean, seeing this again, where this, like, these are just a toxic relationship that is portrayed for like the drama and the laughs and not given the gravity that it probably definitely really deserves.
Yeah, about the two of them, like, she almost became like a meme, or a gif, like whoever's against the queen will die, and calling him Colty, and the cat is Kooky Dookie. Like, those became like catchy. So then it became almost like a punchline rather than a very serious issue. One thing we should also note is that they had each posted from their Instagram, and they were posting like stories and updates while all these domestic violence incidents were happening. I think she had started a GoFundMe for her bail and to pay for a lawyer, if I remember correctly. And then she had, here we are again, where I went a lot deeper than I probably should have. But she had posted videos, and then other people posted videos and screenshots of Colton online with other women, sending obscene videos and pictures to people. So I think, Adam, like you said, he's not as innocent as he seems. Not that he deserved to be assaulted, but
correct. Yeah, and obviously that goes for everyone. I think part of what allows the show to portray it in the way that it was done is that Colt is larger than her. And so I think that a lot of the way that the show presents it is that the cops were called, but maybe it was unnecessary. And that is not the reality of it, right? If any level of violence or any level of abuse is occurring, the police should be called. But they kind of play it off as, be a man, right? Or like, why are you doing this? Or why did you have to have your mom step in, right? Kind of dismissing, his thoughts and feelings or whatever, being that he was, physically larger than her, so he better buck up or whatever.
Yeah, we also saw the police show up in incidents with Ashley and Jay. Ashley from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, and Jay, they went back and forth with restraining orders. And things. I think they officially divorced recently, though, right?
Last I saw was the beginning of the pandemic, and they were like on vacation in Florida together in like April, which just tracks with them, I guess, and just the series of questionable decisions.
Yeah, I don't know what their current status is. And then we also saw fights with not even just their partners, but their family members, with Pedro and Chantel's family. So
right. I mean, I think again, with Ashley and Jay, if I'm recalling correctly, there was maybe one time when she had called the police because he was showing up and not leaving. And he, it seems like had been cheating on her. With Pedro and the family of Chantal, I mean, they have their own spin-off show. And I think part of it is, that while her family is portrayed as just being completely off the rails, I think they also understand that being off the rails is what gets you a spin-off show.
Right.
Where again, it's the over-the-top drama and aggression, which is, they're using to their benefit, and is what people undoubtedly would tune into their spin-off show for. So it's this really dangerous presentation of like bad criminal acts that get rewarded.
Yeah, they get rewarded with contracts.
Right. Yeah. So for that family in particular, I think it was a Thanksgiving dinner. It was some sort of family dinner where Pedro and Chantal's younger brother, I believe, River, physically they punch each other. They push the table. The lamp gets hit, and it's just kind of, they move on. Like they talk about it. Like it's brought up in conversation briefly in later episodes, but no one kind of addresses the fact that two people in this family came to blows at a dinner, and that's just not appropriate behavior, right? It's completely off, you know, like you guys have said, off the rails. And so again, it makes you wonder if the families are able to move on past this so quickly, how much of it was genuine and how much of it was perhaps played up, right? And I have a number of friends that are in the TV industry and have come from other, you know, working on other reality shows. And so like the dirty little secret for a lot of the MTV ones, right, is they don't necessarily manufacture drama, but they ply them with enough alcohol that drama follows. And so I'm kind of wondering how much of this is kind of, you know, the producers noticing, hey, these two people aren't getting along. Let's force them into a dinner with each other, or make sure that there's alcohol present. So like it does come to a head, but then again, like it does seem like without the cameras, would they have responded in this way? I don't exactly know.
Yeah, I don't think that even if it is staged or even if it's real, I don't know if like the average viewer, not that we're better than the average viewer, but I don't know that the average viewers are leaving this with like, maybe I should work on my interpersonal communication skills.
Right.
What can I learn about domestic violence or family violence?
Right. I mean, admittedly, I'm not leaving with those takeaways from watching this either, but there is the recognition that like, this is entertainment, this is hyped up, this is not acceptable behavior in reality.
Definitely.
So the other thing that we should discuss is about how, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the ways that Americans wield immigration status and deportation over their partners. I think that threat is ever present. And I don't know that I've seen it on the other shows, that when Americans go to other countries, that the romantic interests in other countries have threatened to deport the Americans, which is interesting.
So like I think Paul and Carini again are like a good example of this. So there's one of the episodes they're kind of fighting. She's not really sold on moving to America. His mom, I believe, has locked him out of the house for whatever reason. And his idea to try to convince her that the US is where she should live is he takes her to a grocery store and basically is just showing her like, look at all of these foods and look at all of these different things. Basically, the idea being that she would be like wowed by America and kind of like forgive everything else that's going on. And she says something to the effect of like, yeah, this is great, but we have food in Brazil too. And we also don't have all of the problems that you're bringing into my life. And so knowing what we know about like the sexual abuse that may have gone on, and then also the way that he kind of is acting like this immigration is such a great gift to give to her, it does come off manipulative and abusive and kind of him lording this thing over her head.
Yeah, I mean, and you see this, I mean, I think you see this actually with a lot of the couples that this happens, you know, not just some of the most sort of extreme examples, but, you know, you look at the couple like Danielle and Mohammed, where, I mean, I'll say actually with them and with another couple, you know, George and Anfisa, like, it seems like they're all kind of just grifting each other in many, many ways throughout this. There's been a lot of sort of dishonesty, in some ways crimes committed against the other or just crimes committed in general with these two couples. But seeing that, you know, once Mohammed's here in the United States, that Danielle's very much lording his immigration status over him. George and Anfisa as well. I mean, she, you know, I think committed some sort of like, you know, used his credit card without his authorization when she was in Russia, was shut off his phone, or like reset his phone regularly when she was upset with him. But the same thing, once she comes to the United States, is this lording of, you know, the immigration status over them.
A lot of the people on the show have like lied about their financial status, claiming that they have more money than they do, especially to people in kind of developing areas or developing countries. That's, I think, pretty gross, to be honest. You know, but then, yeah, using that, I'll have you deported as a threat to get what they want out of people. And even Danielle and Mohammed, Danielle used that even as punishment after they separated. So the divorce versus the annulment, just as like that final nail in the coffin, that final FU, which really creates this awful power imbalance. But they're not all bad, right? All of these relationships aren't bad and terrible and criminogenic.
No, I mean, so like just to add on with George and Anfisa, I think this is one of the unique ones where like both sides were grifting one another, where he had lied about how much money he had. He claimed he was a millionaire on the show when he was actually very far in debt. And she was one of the ones that just flat out said, I'm only here for the money and my love is contingent on you having money. And so it kind of blows up, but it was kind of one of these unique situations where, not that this is a good argument, but her argument was that you've kind of defrauded me, right? Where I told you I will only love you if you're rich, and you're lying about being rich. And then again, his response is kind of, well, I don't have the money, but like, what else are you gonna do, right? You want to model, you want to be in the US, you want to have like this career, and I'm the way that you get that, even if I don't have the dough, right? So that was a unique couple for sure.
Do we have our who are your favorite couples? Just non-criminogenic related, non-criminology.
And I gotta look through this list of everyone. Just
and the list that Adam's referring to, I'll just totally out myself on this, is at a very bored point in the summer, I made a bracket for who is the best and who is the worst person on the entire show. And like best I thought was fairly easy. Worst, I mean, you get into like the last couple rounds and it's hard to decide.
Mm-hmm.
A favorite couple on the whole show. Gosh, that is really hard. I mean, so I will say, like, you know, John and Rachel, who we've talked about already, seem like they're both genuinely good people who are genuinely in love. Like, they met on an app, like a singing app, where she posted like one side of a duet and he sang the other side, and that's how they met.
That's a little bit cute.
Like, really, like, she was like, you know, maybe like a month or two pregnant with somebody else's child when they started talking, and like when she told him, he like, you know, the father of the child was out of the picture, and like John's like, well, this is my child, like this is our child, and like completely and totally treats her and the little girl as if they're like, you know, the little girl as if it's, you know, his own child. It was like, okay, like, you guys actually seem really cute together.
Yeah, like they were cute. I like Lauren and Alexi, like they're really cute too. I'm shocked and stunned that David and Annie have survived and are together and happy. Let's talk about a rift.
Yeah, I mean, that's a story arc from his seeming complete and total incompetence as just a human. I mean, as a, you know, failure of a father to his adult children, inability to seemingly do anything on his own, and like they have a cooking show now. They've moved to Arizona. It seems like things are going pretty well.
Yeah, because they had been like homeless at one point. They were living in like an old fire station, was it? Like,
yeah, the upstairs of a old fire station that his buddy owned.
Yeah, so maybe there's more love to the show than we know.
Certainly.
So my favorite couple is Russ and Paola. They seem to like each other. They have a kid together now. As far as I know, they're still together. And the relationship seemed more equal than some of the other ones, where like she was kind of putting up a fight with some of his shenanigans in a way that a lot of the other the immigrant would not, right? Because they don't want to kind of jeopardize their status. She would push back a lot more when he was being unreasonable. And I feel like they loved each other enough to get through whatever issues they may have had.
Okay, I don't know if they would make my top list. I think my true favorite has to be Angela and Michael.
I mean, they are perplexing, but they really seem to be very much in love.
Yeah.
And they've had some turbulent times, but there hasn't been anything really criminal short of the cake in the face. I mean, I guess technically could be assault. Because every time he did something wrong, if he cheated on her, he bought her a cake, which I find endearing, but then she got mad at him and smashed it in his face. But I'm really excited to find that clip so I can put it in here. But they are an odd match. They are determined to have children. She just needs somebody to tote her egg.
Yeah, that relationship is interesting to me because, like you guys have mentioned, the two of them seem quite, they like each other a lot, and is a lot of familial stuff. So his side basically is saying, you get married to have kids, and she's older and cannot, there's medical reasons. And so there's kind of a hint that perhaps he would go outside of the marriage to get this child. And she says, absolutely not. And it looks like the family will get mad at him if that's his response, but he agrees with her and says, I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to have, some other woman provide a child. And then they turn to her family and her daughter basically saying, can we have one of your eggs and can you bring a child to term? And the daughter actually says no. And so now it's kind of the families are not seeing eye to eye more than the people in the couple themselves, which I think is a little bit different.
I think that's also wildly realistic, though.
Yeah,
for sure.
Right, that it's not just about the people in a relationship, but the dynamics with everybody else. So maybe it's not as scripted as we think. What does Angela call his set of friends? But she calls them the kooks or something, and it's my favorite thing.
Right.
All right. Any other thoughts about 90 Day Fiance? You want to shout out any more couples that you've thought of or skimmed over?
I will say, let me look up the names just so I'm right here.
Andre and Elizabeth seem like a very perplexing inability to understand culture and basic respect for other people and other people's families.
Mm-hmm. So he seems to be the man must do X, Y, and Z things. Mm-hmm. And then they're living off of money from her father. And so a number of times on the show, he's questioned by family members, basically using his own kind of misogyny and toxic masculinity against him of, you keep saying I'm the man of the house, my way is the word, she'll agree with what I say. But then the kind of flip side of that is that you're not the breadwinner, right? Where it's kind of, you want to have your cake and eat it too. You want to demand and be the man of the house without doing what in your culture or what they're saying he should do. The other couple that I want to kind of shout out that is so weird to me is Mark and Nikki. And so there's a huge age gap here, and I believe they've aged up since the show, but when the show began, she was 19 and he was 58. And while that's a large age gap on its own, she is actually the age of one of his daughters. And so there's a number of interactions on the show where he's treating her more like his kid, where he's saying, don't put your hand on the window, and my kid's like this, why don't you? And it's this very kind of creepy, he doesn't really understand what love is and is kind of mixing up paternal love and romantic love. And it comes off as very icky.
We want to think that age doesn't matter, but there still needs to be an equal power balance and an equal partnership regardless of age.
Yeah, and the dynamic does not reflect that. I agree, right? It's yeah, not to age shame anyone, I guess, but the way that they interact is not just a regular romantic couple with an age gap. It is dipping into other stuff that gets weird.
Oh man, I feel like we could keep talking about this forever. Because this is honestly my guilty pleasure. Like I said, I didn't normally tell people that I watched this, but now, you know what? Let's just put it all out there. It's 2020.
Okay, I jokingly put it out on Twitter over the summer that we should be able to make an actual empirical, research paper out of this. And the number of people that came out of serious people that came out of the woodworks, oh yeah, totally. We're not alone.
I know. There's definitely something good there. I think you could have a very cool journal article about this. I'm still trying to work on a regression model to predict winners from The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. But I would need to go back and code.
One of my friends, who's a social psychologist, has a paper coming, or she's working on doing that, but with Survivor.
Ooh, very neat.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be cool. Or you could do it with Naked and Afraid too.
Yeah, like all kinds of game theory I bet you can bring in, right? Where it's like you want to be feared but not too feared, right? There's like a whole you don't want to be the front runner because then you got eyes on you, and you don't want to be the one that everyone sees as a non-threat, right? So yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like
I think
that.
this is also why we're not fun at parties. Y'all.
Speak for yourself.
Depends on what kind of party. Well, thank you so much. I will drop your Twitter links in the show information for YouTube, and I really appreciate this. So thanks so much.
Thanks so much for
Thank
having
you.
us on.